and every single time I place my hand on the golf club, I can ensure that it is in the correct spot in my hand. And watch how I'm able to keep that extended arm position. So when I see a golfer on the golf course, they step onto the tee, they've very often got the potential to hit the ball much, much further than they actually do. But as they start to take their setup, make their backswing, make their downswing, they start to leak and lose power, and that then ends up in their total driving distance, which is very often far less than it could be. So today we're going to cover what I see as the 3 biggest power leaks in the golf swing, and more importantly, help you fix them. Now, just before we get started, on my website there is a full training course to help you increase your club head speed. Watch this video and then take that course. That's a really strong combination to get you hitting the ball much further from the tee. So, what is the first power leak that I see? Grip. We have to start with grip. If you are a shorter hitter than you think you should be, there is a very, very good chance that you're not placing the golf club correctly in your hands. It is just a really, really common fault, and we often see the same fault. So, the golfers who lose power through the grip will very much have the golf club or the handle of the club running too high through the hand, too much through the lifeline. So it kind of goes from the knuckle on the index finger through the center or the lifeline of the hand. What that really means is that if I place my hand on the golf club in that fashion, I don't have any mobility in my wrist. I can't sort of use my wrist to create any leverage. There is going to be a second point in this video which we'll come on to, but this is very closely linked to that. So a great little test that you can do is just place your lead hand on the golf club as you would normally, place it behind the golf ball, hold your lead forearm, and if you can't get the club up towards horizontal with the ground, as I can't here, that would suggest that my grip is poor. What we're looking for is to get the golf club to run a lot more through the base of the fingers. The check point I would have you would be middle of the index finger to the base of the little finger. If you can get the golf club running through your hand in that fashion, more through the fingers, it will then feel like you're holding it very much more in the fingers. The pad of your left hand or your lead hand will then sit on top of the handle. And if I do that little exercise again, notice how it's much easier for me to create that leverage or that angle in that lead wrist and raise that club shaft up to horizontal. That little test, that simple test, will tell me that my golf club is being held correctly. Now, if this is a fault that you struggle with, when you've placed the club correctly and you understand where that should be, why not grab, a Sharpie or a marker, like I've got a couple here in my golf bag, and actually just put a line on your glove that you can use on the golf course. So if I've got that glove, I can use it as a training glove, a line on there, and every single time I place my hand on the golf club, I can ensure that it is in the correct spot in my hand. So the first massive power leak that I see is a poor lead hand grip. Number 2, massive leak of power is, we're going to call this a short hand path. I'll explain a little bit more what I mean by that. Just pop the driver down for a moment. We know that if the hands can travel a greater distance in the backswing, we have a much greater chance of creating speed down an impact. The opposite, therefore, is the case. If we have a very short distance that the hands are traveling, we find it very difficult to create speed and we leak or we lose power. So watch these 2 motions. This would be one where the hands are traveling a greater distance in the backswing, and this would be a motion where the arms are flexing and therefore the hands are traveling a much shorter distance. Now, I'm going to call this power leak a shorter hand path. But an easy way to think about that would be a lead arm which is breaking down, or a bent lead arm. Now, I said in that first little point that they were very much linked. If I have that poor grip and I can't create that angle through my wrist, it's likely going to come from that lead arm. So it may well be that you have that poor grip and you have that bent lead arm. They really do go quite commonly together. So that's something that bent arm should fix itself a little bit just by improving that grip. But there's something we can do in the golf swing. Watch what happens if I try and keep my body pretty still. My knees, my hips, my torso. I'm not really going to try and move that at all. I'm not going to add any rotation. If I don't have any rotation, I start to swing my arms. I can probably only move my arms so the club head moves maybe a foot, foot and a half, and then my arms have to start to bend. My elbows have to start to separate for me to get the golf club anywhere near the top of my golf swing. So if I don't engage my body well enough, or don't use my body well enough, it's almost impossible for me to keep my arms extended and have that longer hand path. What the best golfers do is very, very early off the golf ball, they rotate their torso, they allow their hips to rotate, they allow their knees to rotate, and watch how I'm able to keep that extended arm position. My hands are traveling much further. If I can continue that rotation, I'm able to achieve that position at the top where my hands have traveled much further. If my hands travel much further, there's a greater chance of you having much more structure in your arms as well, and that's really, really key. So the second big power leak that I see is a short hand path, and that's very often linked to a bent lead arm. Get the body turning early, and you can start to improve that. The third and final big power leak is, unfortunately, quite difficult to see. It's weight shift. It's how we start to use the ground to generate our power. As you can imagine, it is quite difficult to see because we can measure it with devices and technology, but it's very hard to actually see with the naked eye through a camera. But I'm going to use one of the best drivers in the world to explain this, Rory McIlroy, and I'm going to use an alignment stick to demonstrate this. If I get my set up to this golf ball, I'm going to place this alignment stick outside of my trail heel, and it's going to be around about the width of a palm away from my heel. Now, what we tend to see from Rory, and he is one of the best drivers of the golf ball on the planet, is if we look at his hips and we referenced this alignment stick, very early in his golf swing, he would actually have a slight lateral movement towards that alignment stick. As he does that, he's starting to shift his mass. He's starting to put weight, he's starting to put pressure into that trail leg. If we take this to the extreme, the golfers that we see competing in World Long Drive, they do this. They have a very early and noticeable shift into that trail side. If we don't get an early shift into that trail side, it's very difficult to initiate the downswing at the right point. It's very difficult to get the weight into the lead side at the right point, and it's very difficult to put as much speed in that club head as we can. Very often, the weight shift into that trail side that we see is late. It's a late shift. Rory makes an early shift, and this is a huge power leak. If you don't shift early, it's very hard to recover that. So this little exercise can be really good. You can take your address, you can visualize where that is, and you can actually start and feel like as you move that club away, there's a little bit more force, there's a little bit more aggression. You feel like you're moving into that trail side a little bit more, and you're allowing your hips to move fractionally towards that alignment stick. What Rory does fantastically well is once he's made that little shift off the ball, he recenters his hips fantastically well. And that's the final point, is that we have to get the weight into that lead side very early as well. So, a golfer who comes to me who says they don't feel like they're hitting the ball as far as they could, I'm probably thinking straight away three things. Could be a poor grip, could be a really short hand path, and they're probably not using the ground, they're not using their body weight, and they're not shifting their pressure as well as they could. If you can start to improve on those, you can add some speed, you can add some distance. You might not be able to hit as good as Rory, but you can certainly catch up with some of the playing partners that you've got. So we can do all those strings, all those three things, hit his ball in the fairway. Okay, so if you want to add speed and power to your game, eliminate those power leaks, and you'll be absolutely longer from the tee. Big thank you to Monterey Golf and Country Club for giving me access to this fantastic golf course. This is the 18th hole, and make sure you click down below for future videos and to subscribe as well.